Welcome, everybody, to episode 6 of Your Distant Neighbor. This is the podcast where we bring on interesting guests doing a variety of things here in the state of Arizona. We bring on local businesses, interesting people, people with great ideas. I'm excited to have on a good friend of mine, Brian Bogert. Welcome, Brian.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. So you do a number of things. You're a partner at Lockton Companies.
Yep.
You're also the founder of Bogert Companies, where you're a performance coach, a professional speaker.
Yep.
How are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
I love it. So I wanted to bring you on for a couple of reasons. You and I have a history. We do a number of things, and I think you've done some interesting things in the Valley where it's good to touch on, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on a number of things. And so why don't we tell people a little bit how you and I got connected. So you and I both have history at the Phoenix Children's Hospital.
That's right.
Correct?
Yep.
And so I was a volunteer there, and I was trying to get more involved with the foundation, with donating time back and money to the Children's Hospital, and I got connected with you, and you're the founder of the PALS Group. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the PALS Group is and why you founded it? I'm interested in the motivation behind it because I think it's a huge thing.
So at a high level, and I'll dig into more detail as we get into the story, but PALS stands for Patient and Family Alumni Leadership. So it's an acronym. It originally started as Patient Alumni Leadership, and the "and family" is kind of a silent as it relates to the acronym, but it's because we recognized that there were family members for individuals, alumni at the hospital, that we needed to have their influence. And the whole purpose of the group really was an idea to begin to teach the importance of philanthropy in adulthood, to be able to impact the lives of others, and for prior patients to tell their story in an effective manner to be able to impact the lives of others, right? So more or less act as ambassadors on behalf of the hospital. So the original idea was really more or less to create a mentorship program for current patients, probably in the teenage years, to learn these tools, learn these resources. And what it led to was really more of an actual philanthropy group where we do a lot of fundraising. And we have created an annual grant cycle that funds innovative, creative grants that can be applied for by anybody in the hospital, that is designed to pay for, implement, and create programs that enhance the overall experience for patients and families at the hospital. So that's what PALS is. So let me talk about kind of what led to PALS and why I felt this is kind of a personal mission to kind of get this rolling. So when I was 7 years old, I was run over by a truck. My left arm was completely severed from my body. It was 10 feet away. I tore my spleen, so I've got a scar down my stomach, and I've got a tire track scar on my stomach. They reattached my arm. I had 22 surgeries over the next 5 to 6 years, and a great deal of reconstruction, rehab, etc. So very early on, I was a unique story in the Valley, but a unique story at the hospital. And I've never been described as a shy person. So from the very early age of 7, 8, 9, 10, I was tapped into frequently to give talks about my story, give talks about the reason they need to give money, give talks about X, Y, and Z. And so I've been doing that for the hospital basically since my accident, so over 20 years. And that was really my involvement with the hospital for a long time. It was really arm's length. It was kind of talking 5 to 10 times a year. It was getting involved, talking to boards, talking to executives of organizations, getting them to do things, being on the telethons, being on the radiothons, being involved in lots of ways where my unique story could help differentiate and really talk about the world-class care that we have right here in the Valley. And so that was a great way to be involved for many, many years. When I was a teenager, myself and one of the other founding members of PALS, Gabe Trujillo, were on a group called the Young Philanthropists. And the Young Philanthropists was hospital-initiated, hospital-led, and it was the idea to teach teenagers the importance of philanthropy in adulthood, right? So this basic idea was kind of the antithesis that led up to PALS, although it's now migrated into something different. was a group of, I want to say 10 to 15 of us, all of us under the age of 18. We worked with the board of directors for the foundation, and we fundraised $50,000 in our first year. But we went through the process of creating a mission statement. We went through the process of creating kind of action items. How are we going to go about doing this? Right? What are our values? What are we going to do with this money? And that was a really powerful experience for me as a teenager, because it gave me a different perspective outside of the speaking side as to how this works and how I could use my story effectively. So then I went through this whole process of being disconnected from the hospital because I went away to college and was just doing my thing. And there was a 5 to 7 year period where I just really wasn't that involved. Came back to the Valley after college, got involved professionally. And I said, you know what, I need to get back involved with the hospital. And so started getting involved really more or less again on the speaking side. And then I got involved in the golf tournament committee, and I got involved in a few of the other committees and started raising money and selling sponsorships and doing all these cool things for someone in their early 20s. But it only took a couple of years before I was feeling like I wasn't having the direct impact that I wanted. I wasn't leaving the legacy for myself and for what I felt like was going to be important in the hospital. And so I said, you know, I really want to make my own mark. I want to do something that's different. I want to create something that's new, grassroots, something that's unique, and frankly, something that's sustainable. Because I felt like a lot of these ancillary groups over the years that had been started were hospital initiated and hospital led. And for whatever reason, right, they've been fizzling out over the years. And so this I felt like was an opportunity to have a patient-initiated, patient-led group that could potentially tap into the foundation to have a pretty cool platform to have something really unique. And so I called Steve Schnall, who's the president of the foundation, who's been a good friend of mine for a long time, and we sat down and brainstormed on it. And then we started making calls, and we called probably 20 other children's hospitals across the country, and nobody else was doing this. Nobody. But every single one of them said, no, but that's a great idea, so let us know once it's up and running how we can copy it, right? And so we just did it. So I reached out to probably 10 other prior patients. Foundation helped me populate a list. 4 of them, I think, were interested. 3 of them were interested. I'm trying to remember the exact number now. And we all just sat around the table, and I kind of painted for them what I thought the vision was going to be. And I also told them that this is going to be something that's only going to work if we all have buy-in. This is only going to be something that works if it's not Brian's idea, but if it's our collective idea. It's only something that's going to work if we can all have our blood, sweat, and tears in it, and we can build it from the ground up. And oh, by the way, the hospital will be involved as much or as little as we want them to be, because that was Steve's agreement to me. And so we were given some foundation support to do that. But essentially the rest is history. So this was... actually, it was November of 2009, so we're right in the mix of our 6-year anniversary right now, and excited to say that we're in a position where I think we're going to cross $100,000 mark this year on total impact to the hospital, and you've been a big part of that. But so I led the group for the first 5 years, frankly, and you, my friend, came in and you just had a different spark and a different initiative, and took a little bit different energy and approach to the group, particularly on the fundraising side than some of our other members. And that was okay, because that was just what your skill set was. But you also jumped right in and kind of took the bull by the horns, and you were someone that I identified pretty early. I wanted to be part of my succession plan so that I wasn't leading the group for the entire time. And so you jumped in over the last couple of years and really leveraged me up, and we've gone out and gotten some pretty cool gifts in the last couple of years as a result of it, and you've really helped change the dynamic of the group. But that was where it started, and what I'm excited about more than anything is it was almost a year ago today that I kind of handed off the reins to you, and where we are today is a direct result of the involvement that you've had. And we've got a new blood, we have a new energy, we have a new feel to the group, and it's exciting. I'm excited for the future of where this is going to head. So thank you, because you really stepped up and have taken and demonstrated tremendous leadership, frankly.
Well, I appreciate that. And the accolades, I think, should still land square in your lap, because you did a ton and took the group so far. But I think kind of fundamentally, it's interesting. All of us from the group, and especially the founders, and I know myself, a lot of us have done volunteering, fundraising, speaking prior for different organizations, right? I did speaking for the American Heart Association and some fundraising, and there is this little bit of a disconnect. It feels like sometimes when we do this kind of good work, where it's like you raise the money, someone says thank you, and you kind of move on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see a trend. Part of what I was so attracted to PALS was this idea that you could do the hard work, right? You can raise the money. especially with PALS, in a unique way, because we can plan events and we can get buy-in from the community that way. It's not just calling up your friends and family. So many of the groups or charities that I've been a part of, it's just, hey, call your 10 closest people and ask them to donate $25, and that'll get you to $250, and then you ask someone. And there's just kind of this disconnect where, the group like this, you can have buy-in by planning an event, inviting your friends and family out, where you're providing something of value to them. They feel good because they're providing a value to the hospital. And then we can go back and really decide what happens with those funds. And I think that's hugely important, and where we're going to see a trend in some of these volunteer groups kind of pop up where, that's the most value I get out of it, is at the end of the year we get to go, wow, look at these people. These are the people that we're going to help.
That's right.
These are the people that need the money. This is what they need it for. And, I think too, with having a say in where the funds go, we're able to pick out some of the more innovative, unique, special ideas, right?
Totally agree.
That we know, have that potential. And why don't you talk a little bit about, the 2 apps that you guys funded? Because I think they've had tremendous success, and I think they have a lasting impact, not only on Phoenix Children's Hospital, but throughout the world.
Yeah. So I want to comment on one thing that you just said before I jump in and describe the apps, if that's okay. It's interesting that you said what you said, because I agree with you. I think there's going to be more and more of a trend. What's really interesting to me is that in the nonprofit world, there seems to be a really big disconnect lately in terms of what the organizations are desiring versus what donors are wanting to do.
Yeah.
So, there's a huge push for organizations to get the undesignated funds, the undesignated contributions, because then they can use it for however they see fit, deploy it for the right resources, et cetera. And there's a school of thought that that's the right way to do it. Right, if you're going to be giving and let the organization determine where those funds go. But on the donor side, I feel like there's a bigger trend to want to have designated funds, to want to have more control, to want to have more direction, to want to know what the actual impact is going to be, so that it's not just, hey, we lifted up this organization and our couple of $100 or thousands of dollars or whatever the amount is had this profound impact. But I feel like there's a lot more people, right, who want to see it go to a specific thing and understand what the outcome is, whether or not they get naming rights for it, right? Like the naming has nothing to do with it. It's just a matter of understanding that this was the direct path that my funds benefited. So I think it's really interesting, because I do feel like there's a really big disconnect, particularly in the last 5 years in the nonprofit world, because there's a bigger trend on the donor side to do something opposite of what the organizations want, right? So I think there's got to be a balance.
Yeah,
and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So anyway, but to your original question.
Well, and I think the thing on the balance, though, is important, right? Because you and I have talked about, there's a lot of organizations and so I'm blanking on the name, but the charity that raised a ton of funds, but they had to put a ton of marketing dollars out there, and they basically got shunned for it, right?
Right.
And I think the trend that we're seeing with the designated funds is people want to say, hey, I'm going to donate this, but I want it to purchase something fancy, something shiny. I want it to be the new machine. I want it to be the new building. I want it to have the naming rights. When sometimes it's like, well, we just need a new staff member.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think there has to be that balance.
Yeah, there
between
has to be the balance.
Designated and undesignated.
Yeah, there has to be the balance. And so it's interesting because I'm so invested in the PALS side, there's definitely a lot of designated funds that go in there for me and my wife and my family as it relates to Phoenix Children's Hospital. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I think we're designated on the PCH side and traditionally undesignated on all the other organizations that we support. Maybe it's just because I'm so ingrained in this and it's so meaningful to me. And that's probably a selfish reason, but I've also seen the direct result of how it's impacted, thousands of lives. And so, the 2 best examples I think you were asking about prior, and it was the 2 mobile applications. And so the Journey Board mobile application was the very first grant that we ever funded. I want to say it was $5,000. Maybe it was $5,750. I don't remember the exact number. But it essentially was to take a tool, a platform that allowed the clinical staff to give a tool to the family to understand how they were going to navigate their path in the hospital, right? So from admittance to being inpatient to transition of care to the home, right? The whole spectrum of care, they talked about and put it into basically what was a paper educational tool into a mobile document. because in this technology age, everybody's got a phone, everybody's got an iPad,
right?
And they do this now. They had about 30 different applications for the journey board that were for disease-specific journeys, right? Which I think is even more important. So it's not the general kind of watered down, which is still important, but it takes it a little bit further and deeper. So,
like if you have this problem, this might be your path.
Yes, exactly. And so what our fund did was create an app, but it also created a visual representation of what this app could do and how it could have a benefit, which led to a 6-figure gift that Cox Communications gave to fund the other 30 installments. Right. So our designated approach, right, led to another designated approach that's going to have a profound impact on hundreds of thousands of lives that go through PCH every year, and that people can download even if they're not a PCH patient.
Yeah.
So, it's something that's universal across the system of children's care, and I think that's pretty powerful, right? So that was the very first grant we did. That was 5 years ago now, 5 years ago now. And that's something I'm still always going to be proud of, because it's something tangible you can hold on to, you can see it, and we've seen how it's developed. One of the other ones that I think is probably one of the coolest projects I've frankly ever been involved with is what's called the Simply Saying mobile app. So the Simply Saying mobile app was a grant that we received through PALS that we actually didn't fund. We received it in our second year, and we had just gotten done funding the Journey Board mobile app. And so what we didn't want to do was fund another technology or another mobile application, because we didn't want the brand at PALS is that you've got to be an app to get funded, right? So they were actually one of our top choices. But between the top two, we ended up going with the non-app for that reason alone. And it ended up being probably the best thing we could have done for the purpose of the app. Because what ended up happening was I was in Valley Leadership a few years ago.
Right.
And Valley Leadership, my project group, had decided that we needed to pick a community organization that we were going to support. And we'd gone through 14 different ideas, and all was great. And somebody in our group said, Brian, we did a little bit of research on you. You're doing some cool stuff over at Phoenix Children's. I didn't want to self-promote what we were doing at PALS because I didn't want the group to feel like we needed to do this. And they said, how can we support PALS? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it because I wasn't trying to promote this. But I said, you know what? I think a really great idea might be, why don't we look at some prior grants that went unfunded, and why don't we take on the initiative to raise the funds? And let's not just take what the application was. We wanted something we had some meat on and we could put our hands on and actually have an impact on and invest our time, resources, money, connections, and go from there. So it wasn't just a simple financial project. And so we did that. We got to the Simply Saying app, and there was pretty much unanimous consensus. This is the one we need to do. So the way we set it up is we went and we sat down with child life specialists at the hospital, some of the leadership at the hospital, and we said, okay, great. So this is what the grant was written for, was for a mobile dictionary to put medical terminology for children into layman's terms, children that they could understand and receive.
Right.
So this is a great tool. Awesome. We love this idea. We're totally on board. What other technology applications would you like? What else would be meaningful? You've got to be using healthcare tools or apps that are created elsewhere, right? So if you have 3 or 4 different tools that you're using,
can we build them
all into this?
Right.
That's exactly right. So we sat down and after a brainstorming session, we ended up coming up with 4 different platforms. So there's the dictionary piece, which ended up getting expanded upon. There was the ability to integrate pictures, so things like MRIs or different medical devices. Sorry, I was stumbling on my words there. Other different medical devices could have pictures that you could show the children what they were before. We were able to record sounds, right? So now we could integrate the sounds into that piece. We created and we hired a illustrator to do anatomically correct images that children can draw in. So that's the drawing board portion. So a physician could go in and draw on the brain or through the core or on the skeleton and be able to say, this is what's wrong with your body. Here's what we're going to do with the procedure, and here's how we can do it. And the child can now touch it, feel it, learn it, touch it, move, and they can process what's happening to them. And then there's a teach-back section in there. So these 4 platforms, we also did it bilingual from day one because of the demographics of the patients at the hospital. But this was one of the coolest projects because in a 9-month period, we raised $17,000, just under $17,000. Had some great sponsors with the Haven Family Foundation, Southwest Spine and Sports, the Scottsdale Charros, and then a number of individual donors that kind of came together. Blue Cross Blue Shield was one as well, who all came together and basically wanted some naming rights and some of those things, and they wanted to support this. So we did this in a very short period of time, and went live bilingual right out of the gates. And to date, it's been downloaded over 12,000 times in over 70 countries. So when you talk about the ripple effect and the sustainability, if PALS were to like dissolve tomorrow, which it's not going to happen,
it's there.
That's there. And it's been funded. So they've already done one additional development. They're going to be funding an additional development because the original dollars that we raised. So 3 years later, that's still having an impact.
Yeah.
Right. And 12,000 downloads in over 70 countries, bilingual. Right? Think of the hundreds of thousands of lives and people who've interacted with that app and used it as a tool to learn and better cope with what they're dealing with on a healthcare side. So that was one of the coolest things that I've ever been a part of. But PALS, it started with PALS.
Well, and it just kind of hits a home run on all levels, right? It's one of these things that so many people think that you have to have these big developments or some kind of, not that it's not a big idea, but, physically big ideas to make a big impact, or really expensive ideas.
Yeah.
And it's just something that provides value, you know what I mean? And it provides that family-centric care, and it's simple and it's able, you know what I mean? And it just makes sense. It makes sense on so many levels. Yeah. And it can be funded for a relatively small amount of money. You know what I mean?
Well, and so we've always looked to have an understanding of what the scope of a particular grant would do, meaning how many lives would it impact, how many patients would it impact.
Right.
And clearly there's no way to predict that. Generally, we try to look and just so that we can understand and make a calculated decision. But the reality of it is if any one grant that we fund impacts one child or one family and it makes their overall experience better, enhanced, they have more tools to understand what's happening to them, then it's worth whatever investment it is. So we've done others that have a much more focused impact where literally there might be 10 or 20 families that are ever impacted by the grant. And we just make a calculated decision because the power of what's going to happen for those 10 or 20 families is on a much greater scale, right? So I love what you just said because it doesn't always have to be huge, right? It doesn't always have to be far-reaching. It doesn't always have to be profound in how it impacts that one person. But from our standpoint, as patients who experienced care, who experienced healthcare facilities and an environment and recovery and all the components that go along with that, if we just help one family or one kid, it's worth whatever we put into it.
And that's powerful in itself, and it's just interesting where a group can take just something they're passionate about and turn it into something physical and turn it into, and I think that's huge. And I think the apps are a part of that. And
100% agree.
And I think like you said, every grant, if it impacts one family, it impacts one kid, but that's also what makes Phoenix Children's Hospital such a powerful place, right? Is as kids, we walked out of there and it wasn't like we were just some number on a sheet, right? It was like, you're a kid, you're special, we're here to help you.
That's right.
This is a family. And I think that's why we have such an attachment to it.
No doubt.
And that's why we're so passionate about that whole place.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
100% agree with you.
I love it. I want to talk a little bit of transition. So talk to me a little bit about the Bogert Companies and what inspired you to start your business here and kind of what the goals are and just some of your day-to-day and who you work with and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the Bogert Companies wouldn't exist without my work at Lockton. So I think that's important to kind of touch on. What kind of took me down this path was starting a family, involved in multiple community and charitable organizations, sitting on lots of different boards. And then I've been a part of growing an office from 4 associates to 40 associates in the last 4.5 years. And on a revenue perspective, it's had exponential growth. And so I've been hard charging, running really, really hard, burning the candle on both ends. And I'm blessed, right? I've had this beautiful opportunity in so many ways, but ultimately I ended up hiring a performance coach. Because I wasn't in a position to be able to continue to grow at the level that I felt like I needed to.
Right.
I felt like I was in a place where I didn't see my own blind spots. I didn't know how to create the environments for success for me any longer. And the biggest thing for me was right around the birth of my son, I realized I couldn't live life the same way I was living life because if I was doing everything for my family and I wasn't home to see them, there was a conflict.
Yeah.
And so I had to figure out how to increase my output while either decreasing my input or just being very laser focused with my input and then finding ways to help myself get to the next level, right? And so I hired a coach. And that was kind of the beginning steps of me going down this path of kind of coaching and motivational speaking on a formal platform. Because very quickly after hiring my coach, all of the reasons that I identified for why I went out and hired one became true. And so now I'm operating at a very high level still at Lockton, and I'm blessed to have so many smart associates that allow me to do what I do. My coach has helped me get to the next level so that I'm focused on my family more, so that I'm focused on my fitness and nutrition more, so that I can do in the community what I want to do. And it's a very holistic approach, frankly. And I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't see my blind spots. And some of them were very simple, and some of them were kind of complete reworks. So I bought into that process pretty quickly. But very early on, he started saying to me, Brian, you really should consider doing this. And I kind of said, yeah. I'm paying you a lot of money to make me feel good about myself. So thanks. But I mean, truth of the matter is, he kept talking to me about it, and I had to start listening. And then I had this weird string of events where I had a number of things happen in the world that just kind of struck me in the face, where it's like, you know what, I maybe need to listen. And I also realized that I've been doing motivational speaking really since, I was a little kid, and I've been doing it in a way where it's like, hey, I overcame. I understand mental toughness. I understand what it takes to do hard work and overcome, and challenging with adversity, and how do you navigate life and put yourself in the right state of mind to be able to be successful. And I've done that both personally and professionally. And so I've been shaken to the core on both sides. And it's given me a little bit of a unique perspective. I think what I've recognized is I'm not the only one with a story, right? But that combined with just the path of life that I've been on, I've always had an interest in personal and professional development. So I've been in a position where I like to help others get to the next level. I like to help others see their blind spots. I like to challenge those to not just be status quo and get better, and particularly those people who have potential, and particularly those people who have an interest in self-awareness and self-growth, which is part of the reason that I was very attracted to you early on in the process, because you've always had that intellectual curiosity, right? And right. So the friendship and kind of the pseudo mentorship that's been created through our relationship is, I think, a great example of, it's like, how can I help others get onto a path, make introductions, give some perspective, direction, passion, encouragement to help them get to the next level. And I just started getting some feedback from people in my life where it was like, you know what, I've been doing this anyway. I've been doing the mentorship and the growth and the development anyway. And so it gave me the ability to do it on a formal platform. And frankly, it's been humbling and validating, because it's the world kind of responded to me very positively. And so I've been in a position where I'm coaching business executives, I'm coaching business development executives, I'm coaching pretty much any kind of high growth, high potential individual who's interested in investing in themselves. And so, I've had a handful of opportunities already be created in that world, and then have been doing some actual professional speaking as well. And so it puts me in a position to really more or less put some good back into the world. And it's a platform to allow me to kind of justify the time and do it on a much more formal, intensive platform than kind of the casual stuff I was doing before. And so in a very short period of time, I can have a much more profound impact on people's lives and help them get to the next level. But, I talk about my purpose, and my purpose, I believe, is to be a provider, right? And there's multiple aspects in how the provider comes into play. So it's love and financial security for my family. It's leadership and direction for my associates and those that I mentor and develop. And it's, passion, encouragement, perspective, and direction to pretty much all of those around me. And so that's always been my purpose. It's been my purpose for a long time. And I was able to articulate it much more clearly when I started working with my coach. But what's interesting is everything that I just told you about what my purpose is directly identifies to the work that I do with everybody else. And so I have the ability to go into a room of people and just share my stories, or frankly the stories of others that I've learned from, and do it in a way that we have some tangible, actual skills, lessons that people can walk away with. And then on a one-on-one basis, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, because I can have a direct experience in helping someone get to the next level. And I'm already seeing that as an outcome. And that's it's frankly one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. So
I think it's intriguing to me. So the one thing that I picked up several things, but I love that you said you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for individuals to realize, is we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of really high performing individuals realize that at some point. Maybe it's because they hit a ceiling, Or maybe it's because they're trying to go somewhere and they're not able to. And they realize, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And they go out and they get a coach. They go out and get a mentor. And they say, this is what I think is going on, but you tell me, right? And sometimes that outside perspective and that outside direction makes a huge difference for one reason or another, right? I'd love for you to touch on maybe kind of what you work with individuals on. So if someone comes to you and says, I'm in, let's do it. What does that process look like? Is it identifying the goals and figuring out where they're at and kind of figuring out the path? Yeah.
So as you would expect, I mean, it's although the concepts are universal, it's very tailored to each individual. So it's there's kind of a process that is much more intensive on the front end, which really is kind of a discovery period, and then going through some exercises to help uncover both for them and for myself things like purpose and short-term and long-term goals, and kind of some exercises around believing before doing, and tools around helping you reframe mentally to overcome challenges, but also get yourself really laser focused on what you need to. And then a lot of it comes back to, okay, so if we've identified all these things personally, professionally, and in the community that you want to accomplish in your life, you connect it back to your purpose, you believe before doing, what are the daily things that we need to focus on to get there? So it's a matter of creating a process of intentionality that builds, for lack of a better term, a compounding effect in your life. And so it's doing the things that are most important, sometimes the most difficult in your life, that are the things that will be the greatest reward on the back end. And so it's identifying, within your business, if you need to make 8 points of contact in your day to help grow your business and be successful, great. Well, is it 8? Is it 10? Is it 7? Right? Point being, there's a lot of people who don't think about it from a position of intentionality. Right? And so personally, professionally, and in the community, it's creating intentionality around behaviors that you hold yourself accountable for, and then setting up your environments for success that you do that. So I'll give a couple of examples without using names, because these are things that I've worked on with individuals that I coach. But frankly, sometimes it's the really, really simple stuff.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. And you don't see your own blind spots. And so, there have been opportunities where you can identify in certain people that something is a linchpin, right? Like if this one thing gets done, everything else falls in place, right? Or if this one thing doesn't get done, your days will go to crap. And you won't be in a position to be able to be operating at your highest level. And you probably won't hit those daily practices that you need to accomplish each day.
Right.
And so sometimes there will be a few weeks when you were doing a check-in, right? So it's like we set the baseline, and then a lot of times it's what's working, what's not working. What are you struggling with? What do we need to brainstorm on? Let's think about how do we push this to the next level. So it's constantly evolving, right? The coaching process. But there will be times where inevitably somebody will be like, you know what? I haven't been doing what I need to be doing in personal, business, or community, and they'll identify whatever that thing is. And it's like, okay, so we go through a process of identifying why. So there have been individuals that I've worked with, right, and we find that their linchpin is fitness, right? And it's like if they get up in the morning and within the first 2 hours they get their workout done, they're operating at a higher level every single day. They're accomplishing what they need to do every single day. But for whatever reason, they haven't been setting themselves up for success on going and getting their fitness done. Maybe it's their alarm clock process. Maybe it's their clothes aren't ready ahead of time. Maybe it's the protein bars and shakes or whatever it is in the preparation. And so whatever the case is, it's trying to identify what are those simple things that are preventing you from doing what you know is important.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And on the days that you don't want to, how do we create an environment for success where you don't have the choice, right? So how do you connect it to a deeper purpose so that you're focused on what's most important in your life and you continue to drive your behaviors that way? And if you do this consistently and you put it in front of your face and you're constantly intentional about it, it literally changes your brain chemistry to the point where it just becomes habit, right? So it's a matter of identifying, if we know what it's important to you, why are we not doing it? Right. And I know that sounds like really, really simple, but sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's much more profound, where it's like, somebody that I was coaching just said to me not that long ago as we were going through this process, and they said, I know what my purpose isn't, but I don't know what it is. Right. And so then we go through a dialogue period to help them uncover that. But how interesting is that you know what your purpose isn't, but you don't know what it is. Right. And the purpose, the why, I think is so powerful in our lives. Because if you can connect your behaviors, if you can connect your thought process, if you can connect your goals to your why are you doing it? Right? Everything else becomes a little bit more powerful. And on those days that you don't want to do it, you'll do it anyway.
Because you have a purpose, you
understand why you're doing it, and you're connecting your behaviors to why. That disconnect exists, I think, in a lot of people's lives. And so oftentimes, there's people who even know what their why is or know what their purpose is, but they don't find a way to give themselves that trigger to drive their behavior. So everybody's different, right? And in no way am I up here saying like I've got it all figured out. I still work with my own coach, right? So I am personally focused on my own development. I want to be a better version of myself tomorrow than I am today, right? So in no way am I sitting here from a position of preaching, but what I've learned in my experience is I don't see some of the things that are preventing me from getting to the next level. I don't see what's breaking down in my process. I don't see those simple things that I need to overcome sometimes. That outside influence, that coach, that accountability, that perspective and direction, that's powerful in my own life. And so, that's what's been rewarding as well, is for me to be able to pass that through into the work I'm doing with others that I'm coaching and see those little successes and see those little celebrations and see those progresses, right?
Absolutely.
It's pretty powerful.
Couldn't agree more. And how big, so you touched a little bit on intentionality. It feels like maybe a lot of it comes back to that, right? Being intentional with your goals, where you want to go, what you're trying to accomplish. Is that a big factor in a lot of it, is intentionality?
It's, I think, probably the biggest factor.
Right.
Yeah, and you picked up on that, which is pretty powerful. But, being intentional is what it's all about. And I would say being intentional applies to everything in life.
Exactly. Yeah.
The problem is, I think that there's environments, and we all do it, right? I do it, where sometimes you'll just go through the motions, or you'll be in an environment and you just kind of go with the flow, and you're not intentional about why, or what you're doing there, or what your purpose is there, or who are you trying to connect with, or what's the outcome, or right, any number of things. We'll just go through the motions, and we lack the intentionality. Well, so it's when people say, "I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I'm so busy." If they got really, really intentional with their time and they got focused on what was most important and they eliminated some of those things that aren't, right? And they didn't just go along with the flow, right? You create that intentionality and that focus and things become limitless, frankly. Literally, you can reduce your input and increase your output if you just get really laser focused with your time and you're very intentional with everything that you do. And intention has to do with thought process. It has to do with action, right? It has to do with follow through. There's all these things. It has to do with reflection, right? So it's like you go through that full spectrum of intentionality, right? From the thought to the action to the follow-up to the follow-through, right? And then on reflection, how did it go? What did I learn from it? So it's creating that intentionality around everything that you're doing. So again, right, we talked about this person who's fitness. It's like, and there's more than one person whose world exists like that. So, so they just have to create an environment where they're very, very intentional with making sure that their clothes are in the right place. And again, their protein shakes and their protein bars are ready the night before, and their alarm clock might be across the room or in the other room. The coffee might be brewing ahead of time so that when they wake up in the morning, that's a little boost to get them out of bed, right? And then the intentionality to be able to put something in front of their face every single day to remind them what that purpose is and why are they getting up to go do that fitness. That's intentionality. Right. So I'm happy that you picked up on that, and I could expand on it further, but I think you get the point.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things in that kind of realm of intentionality is I think it's really easy to not be intentional, right?
It's easier.
It's easier to not be intentional. And part of that, I think, is just because we are routine individuals. Success is based off of routine. A lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, what we think, is based on routine. And if you're used to not being intentional about whatever that is, it's easy just to not be intentional, or easier to not be intentional. You almost have to make intentionality
it's
the routine.
Comfortable to not be intentional.
Right, exactly.
And something that I often tell people is it's like you need to force yourself to get uncomfortable, or comfortable rather, being uncomfortable. I mixed up the words on that. You have to force yourself to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. Right. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not progressing, right? So it's getting yourself out of that comfort zone in any capacity in your life.
Yep.
Doing that one extra thing that might be difficult, that might take additional effort, that isn't easy, right? Because it's so much easier to not do something. It's so much easier to not be intentional. But it's comfortable. It's easy.
Yeah. One thing I heard a while back was, if you do what's easy, life is hard. And if you do what's hard, life is easy.
Oh, 100%
And
agree.
it seems a little backwards at first, but then when you start to think about it, when things come up that seem difficult, right? It's like, maybe that's actually what I should be doing, right? Maybe that's the thing that I need to overcome so I can get to that next level. And so the process of having a performance coach, what does that look like? Is that we see these shows where like people come in and bust in the front door and like pull people out of bed and you know, some fitness stuff. That's not what the process looks like, right?
No. And again, it's so geared towards each individual person. So some people need more of a kick in the butt than others. And so it's really just about understanding and tailoring for each individual person. What are those mechanisms that need to be in place? What role does you know, the coach need to play to be able to help them kind of get to that next level? So, you know, almost all of my engagements are on the phone or in person if they're local. And it's really just kind of an intentional meeting that's set up to talk about, reflect, and figure out what we need to do to kind of move to the next level. So obviously I bring a little bit of passion to the process. Obviously there's a level of encouragement to the process, but there's also a level of directness in telling people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And so,
which is important.
It is important, but there's a fine balance and everybody receives that differently. And so it's a matter of, you know, just creating that relationship with that person and understanding what's going to resonate with them and what's not. But that's what the coaching process looks like. But I also, you know, candidly, I often will tell people when I first start working with them, right? It minimizes the role that I play, frankly, but I think it's the truth. I think that going through a coaching process is probably 85 to 90% the individual, and probably 10% someone that they can have quickly established trust with, that can have a process and a platform to facilitate really good self-awareness, really good self-discovery, a really good thought process on how to get to the next level, and then asking questions around those things that we've already talked about, right? What are your blind spots, and creating environments for success and keeping that accountability in place. So, you know, I say that with my own coach, and it's really funny because, you know, I've told it to his face, but without him, without that 10%, right, I wouldn't be where I am. And so that 10% is arguably more beneficial than the 80 or 90% of the work that I'm doing.
Right.
But what's really cool is it's like when you have someone that you're working with say, oh, that sounds really easy. Well, in concept, it is, right? In concept, what needs to be done is really, really easy. What's hard is doing the work. What's hard is making yourself do it. What's hard is taking the initiative and the action and the follow through, the intentionality that it's going to require to actually get it done, right? So you can map out this great plan for someone to get to the next level, but if they don't do the work, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's where it also comes back to the individual, where it's like 80 to 90% self-discovery, self-awareness, and then they've got to take the action and do the work. Generally, the people that are going to work with a coach are those that are investing in themselves and will follow through, right? So, does that answer your question a little bit?
It does. And you know, it kind of comes back to that action piece, right? I mean,
totally.
You have to do the work. You have to do what's difficult. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen, you know? And so many people are, I think it's so routine or easy or comfortable to not do the action, right? So many people want to plan a million things over before actually taking the first step, because it's easier to plan than it is to actually take the first step. Yeah,
but ideas without action are wasted, right? Yeah. It's wasted energy, it's wasted thought, it's wasted time. So why even think of the idea if you're not going to follow through on it?
Right.
I mean, that's just kind of how I'm wired. I mean, that's how I live my daily life. That's what I do professionally at Lockton with what we need to do to prospect and grow and service our clients. That's what I do in the community with the organizations that I represent. It's like you have to come up with strategic, good initiatives. You've got to create a plan. You've got to be intentional with it, but then you've got to do it. You got to work the plan.
Yep.
Right? If you don't work the plan, then it's just a plan. Great. I mean, awesome. Yeah. That means nothing. It's worth a whole $0. And so, you know, same thing comes through with fundraising, right? With what we're doing with PALS, with what we're doing with St. Vincent de Paul, with what we're doing with all these other organizations. It's like, come up with a great plan and then you got to go out and do it.
Yeah.
But that's the exciting part too. I mean, I personally think that doing the work is the fun part. So.
Well, and because not doing the work is so easy for a lot of people, sometimes that in itself, taking action and doing something, even if you don't have the perfect plan in place, sometimes that'll yield better results than you could ever imagine. You know what I mean? Just taking action and just grabbing the bull by the horns and saying, I'm not exactly sure what's going to work best, but let's try this out and see what happens.
Yeah, 100% agree. So, I just don't. I mean, that, you know, I'm like a big believer too. It's like there's no perfect time for anything.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you just, if it's something that you think is important, you think is a good idea, just do it. Just do it. Yeah. And if you don't know how to do it, find the right people to help you figure out how to do it, right? So it's like, if you're like, oh, I don't have the resources, or I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the expertise, Okay, well, so what have you done to find the time? What have you done to find the expertise? What have you done to find the money?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean any of those have to be your own, right? So it's just a matter, I think, of like not putting up walls and hurdles, because the most successful people in life focus on solutions, not on problems.
Yep.
Right? So it's like find the solution, apply the solution, and just go do it. The problems, I mean, we could talk about problems all day long. If we wanted to, we could sit here and talk about all the reasons why you don't do something in life, and it's way easier to come up with those reasons than just going and doing it. So
it's kind of just getting out of your own way.
It's 100% getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own way. And I think that's applicable to more things than we can imagine, and that's where people just tend to get in their own way for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy when you think about it.
But it's really funny too, because it's like one of those things where getting out of your own way. There was a movie a while back that had a quote that I'm going to totally butcher, and I'm probably not even going to reflect the quote, but it's more about the action behind the quote. And it's this idea that if you've got something scary in front of you, right? Like maybe you don't like to speak in front of a group of people, right? It's like, so you stand up in front of the group of people, you're terrified, you're sweating, you're like totally uncomfortable. You got to say the first word. Once you say the first word, the second word, the third word, the fourth word, the fifth word, right? Like progressively it's going to go down from there. It will get easier. So it's like the very first step is always the hardest. The first word, the first action is always the hardest. And then it's like there's some effect that comes in. And so it's like if you can just force yourself to overcome that little bit of fear, immediately the fear goes down. It might not go away, right? You might still be terrified in front of that group, but you start getting a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And then 90 seconds in, all of a sudden you might be in your element, and you might still be shaking and you might still be nervous, but like you're flowing at least and you're telling it. But it's no different, right? It's like it's no different than like dating, right? Going up and just asking the question like, "Hey, what are you doing on Friday night?" I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'd love to get to know you better. Like it's just the most meaningful things in life, I think, just come from like probably the scariest things, but it's just jump in with both feet, and all of a sudden you learn by fire.
Yeah. And that's where practice makes perfect comes in, right? That's the definition of that. And, someone who I know has done a ton of public speaking said, you never quite get over it, right? There's certain things you just never quite get over. There's still going to be a little bit of butterflies. There's still going to be, again, that's kind of how you know you're doing something important or doing something special. Yeah. But it's not going to be tremendously easy ever,
Never. I mean, and I love that statement. I mean, it never ever gets easier.
Yeah.
It doesn't always totally go away. I mean, so I can't tell you how many thousands of speeches I've given in front of people. Yep. I honestly don't know. In the last 25 years, I couldn't track it for you. I don't know. I just gave a speech last night, and I was like really nervous before I got up in front of the group. And I actually don't remember the last time I was nervous in front of a group of people, but it was a different concept. It was a different conversation than I'd had before. It was a little bit different material. It was going to be a different approach, and the timing on it was a little bit strange. And you know what? It was one of those things where it was like, you got to do it. You just got to go do it. And I kid you not, every single butterfly was gone within 60 seconds. I got up there, my mouth was a little parched, right? I was sweating a little bit. I was a little warm. My heart rate started racing.
Yeah.
Right? Like all those things that like would prevent me from not doing it or from like stumbling. And it's like, just get in and talk for the first minute. It doesn't even matter what you say for the first minute. Just make it out. Like it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. But after that first minute, all of that was gone.
Yeah.
And you'd think with all the times I've been in front of groups of people, right, motivating and giving my story and helping raise money or talking about lessons and things that I work on with my coaching individuals, but on a larger platform in front of a group of people, right, a team of people to help them get better, you'd think that I wouldn't. But I get nervous every time.
Yeah.
Every time. And now in varying degrees. Last night was probably the worst it's been in I can ever remember. But again, it was like because there was new variables involved.
Yeah.
60 seconds in, we were good to go.
And it all kind of ties into with fear and nerves and so fear is that imagining something bad's going to happen, which is still that kind of getting in your own way, and so once you can kind of realize, and that's part of the whole practice makes perfect and just taking the first step is once you do it once, you go, okay, I didn't die, right?
Yeah.
I didn't, I'm still alive. Everything's good. Everything's fine. And then you can do it one more time. And that's why the first step's always the hardest.
So do you know what the only thing faith and fear have in common?
No.
An undetermined future.
Okay. I like that.
Right? So the more you overcome fear, the more you prove to yourself that you can do it, the more you can operate from a position of faith.
Right.
That's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
It's a mindset thing. That's all that is. It's a trick.
Right.
So if you can put yourself in the thought process where you just have faith, that doesn't mean the nerves will go away.
Yeah.
But it's a positive energy. That positive energy is going to fuel positive results. Fear, right? Candidly, a lot of my career was operated from a position of fear, right? This fear that I wasn't going to be successful, this fear that I was going to not be able to provide for my family, this fear that I was going to like crash and burn and fail. And frankly, I still might. I don't know. Maybe I am right now and I'm just not aware of it. But point being, it's like it's much more productive to operate from a position of faith, right? If you operate from a position of faith and you believe that it's going to happen, it's the power of the mind right there. And you're tapping into that. And if you operate from a position of faith, you operate from a position of abundance, right? An abundant mentality where it's like you just believe it's going to happen and you live abundantly, stuff just happens. It literally just happens. It's magical. And I know it sounds like the secret stuff. I know it sounds like all crazy.
Right.
But I've seen it. I've witnessed it too many times in my life with those people around me, in my own life, right? The mind is a tricky, powerful thing. And if you just tap into it, right? Your mind can be your most powerful weapon or your most powerful weakness.
Yeah.
You choose.
Well, and anyone who kind of throws any of that stuff to the wind, I mean, the brain is something that we just know nothing about still. We know very little about the brain, and we thought we knew a bunch of stuff, but it's like every month, every year, it's like, oh, well, it does this now, And so the fact that people discount any of that stuff blows me away a little bit, because we don't know what we don't know. I'm going to circle on that back.
We don't know what we don't know.
We got a few minutes left. I just want to talk a little bit. You've been a long time. I'm switching subjects completely if you're all right with it.
It's awesome.
You've been a long time resident of Phoenix.
Yep.
What keeps you here? What do you like about it? I mean, I love Phoenix, and it seems to be a hot and growing place, I think, for families and young people. But there's still something about Arizona. Part of the reason we've got this podcast is to showcase everything great about it. There still seems to be something about Arizona that people want to get away from here, but they always end up coming back. Why do you think that is?
Why do they leave and then come back? Because I think sometimes you don't appreciate what you've got until you don't have it. Right?
Okay, fair enough.
But I mean, I've lived in all over the place. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in England. I've lived in California. I've traveled all over the world. I come back because I'm addicted to it. I mean, okay. It sounds a little bit crazy, but there's very few places in the world that you get 330 days of sunshine. And I joke with people that the sun is my fuel, that the sun is my energy. But like legitimately, if it's like rainy for more than a day here, I get depressed. Like my energy goes down. Like I literally might hurt myself physically if I lived somewhere else because it just like I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Or I'd have to live in a tanning bed or something. I don't know. Like, which is totally unhealthy. I just, it's beautiful here. I mean, when it's 70 degrees on New Year's Day and you can go outside with your family and spend some time, or, next week's Thanksgiving, and I mean, it'll probably be in the 60s or 70s. We'll probably spend some time outside.
Yeah.
I love to be outside. I love the environment. But, outside of that, my family's here. I mean, that's a big motivator for me. And especially now that I have kids, having aunts and uncles and grandparents and great grandparents, and my wife's family has now moved here, and I mean all these beautiful things. It's like I've always been close to family. I've always appreciated family. There's a whole different level of appreciation once you have kids, because you start seeing it from the context of that. So I would have told you, even 3-4 years ago, yeah, I could live somewhere else. No, I couldn't at this point. Yeah. Now we're locked in, because with the kids, it's too important to me to see the influence that all of those other family members have on our children. And I mean, when they say it takes a village to raise kids, I'm learning that that's such a true statement. And I don't know what we would have done the last few years without family. So that's a big motivator. And then honestly, I just think the general culture in Phoenix is phenomenal. I mean, being one of the fastest growing cities, on average year over year for the last 20 years is pretty incredible, because you have such a good mix of cultures from across the country. You have good mix of perspective, a good mix of appreciation for what Arizona has to offer. And so the really interesting part is, I don't even know what the population is now. What is it, 4.5 or 5 million people?
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It could be bigger, it could be smaller. I could be totally wrong. I'm usually outdated on those stats. But point being, I mean, we're in the top 6 or 7 largest cities in the country, yep. But I think we have a really small city feel.
Yeah.
Right. And so Phoenix is very much a city where there's, a couple of degrees of separation. And then the more time I spend here, the more it's we've got common connections with people. In fact, I just had lunch right before we came here, and I'm sitting with someone, and he and I knew 2 or 3 of the same people, and it came about in a totally organic way that we discovered it. And one of my best friends, one of the people I respect most in the world that moved to Atlanta, he's known and worked with in his prior life, and they worked on some community projects together. It's, I mean, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that environment exists in other places, and the fact that people still have that interest in getting to know others, I think is relatively unique, because there's a lot of other cities that maybe are moving a little too fast.
Yeah.
Not that that's bad, right? It's just that that's not the culture or the environment that I choose to live in for myself, or that I choose to live in with my children. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I just think it's beautiful here. You can't beat it.
You really can't. You can't beat it. And we are growing quickly. And I think part of it is there were so many transplants before, right, where they appreciated it. But I think to have a generation that grew up, that's growing up here, I think is causing a whole nother wave of excitement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
About the city, about the small town feel, about the whole thing. And so, and we continue to have people to move here.
Yeah. And the only gripe I have, and I'm just going to say this, is I just want everybody to stop bringing their plants from out of town. Because I never had allergies growing up, but like the more pollens and grasses and weeds and things that come into this city because people bring them from all over the country, this is like a cesspot for allergies now, and I finally have allergies in my life, and it sucks. So please stop bringing your plants. I just want the desert.
And I don't know if that's going to stop, man.
I have no control over that. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Too funny. So before we wrap up, I know you've got an event coming up on December 2nd. Is that correct?
Yeah, December 2nd.
So we want to talk about it a little bit and promote it?
Yeah, sure. So December 2nd. So I'm actually co-hosting an event with my coach.
Okay.
So he and I are doing an event. It's mental toughness and next level planning day. So we're going to spend about half of the day focused on a lot of the concepts that we work on with the individuals that we coach directly. Things like purpose and planning and identifying daily practices and some tools. So it's a real kind of great crash course for people who don't necessarily want to be in a position to work with a coach, but get some of the concepts to help them apply to their own lives. And then, it's December, right before we know it. So it'll be in December, and it's really about how to plan appropriately for this next upcoming year. And so, I'm a big believer that you shouldn't necessarily just plan on an annual basis. So there's components where we've got some macro planning, and then we've got some micro planning, and it's how do you kind of refine but work your plan, right? And so that's kind of the context of the event. So right now we've got a number of people RSVP'd. It's going to be a phenomenal event, a number of really cool people that I'm sure others would want to be connected with. High-performing individuals, very successful individuals who really are just taking a step back, and regardless of the level of success that they've reached in their lives, they see this as an opportunity to invest in themselves. And so, frankly, we're a little bit humbled. Both my coach and I, Ben Newman, are humbled by the response that we've gotten for this event, but would love to have any others that are interested. And really, it's about putting yourself in an environment with like-minded individuals and those that are going to challenge you to get to the next level. And the last one that we did back in July, I've already heard stories of multiple people who've created friendships, relationships, business working relationships, helped produce revenue for their businesses as a result of the connections that came from that room and the lessons that they learned. And that's what it's all about. Is again, if we can impact just one person to do one thing better, be a slightly better person than they are today. That's what it's about. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested in learning more on that, you can send me an email at Brian. That's Brian with an I. At Brian Bogert, BOGERT.com. And that would be a great way to get to know me.
And that's also the same email if they're interested in your coaching, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And so if you want to check out a little bit of information around my coaching business, go to www.brianbogert.com. That's going to be a great platform to figure out how to connect with me on social media. Connect with me to see the weekly YouTube videos that I put out,
which are amazing.
Yeah, call those Bogert's Bullets. And so it's just kind of a 2 to 3 minute high level piece to get some interest on a topic, to get people to kind of get some energy and focus for the week. And that'd be a way to connect with me to learn a little bit more about the work that I'm doing there. And then through that avenue as well, again, I'm still at Lockton, and so reach out to me. Would always love to talk about, determining if and how I can help you in whatever platform or avenue that is, even if that means we never do any business together. So I'm just candidly interested in figuring out how to help others, and I'd love to connect with anybody listening. So
thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I love it.
I love it. you.